Before his wife disappeared, Edward Peace reportedly told more than one person that he didn't believe she'd still be living at home by the weekend. At the time, Winifred Peace was 31 years old and living in Bentley with her husband and their 2 young children. Then, on the afternoon of the 22nd of October, 1959, she vanished. There were sightings that some people swore were genuine, and there were questions that never seemed to go away. More than 60 years later, nobody can say with certainty whether Winifred Peace walked away from her life, crossed paths with the wrong person, or met her end at the hands of someone she knew. This is Vanished West, a podcast exploring the stories of people who disappeared across Western Australia. Each episode examines the lives they left behind, the investigations that followed, and the questions that remain unanswered. If you believe stories like these deserve to be heard and that the missing should never be forgotten, follow Vanished West wherever you're listening. Vanished West is independently researched and produced by me. If you'd like to help keep the podcast going, you can support the show through Buy Me a Coffee. The link is in the episode description. Winifred Peace was born on the 26th of February 1928 in Cottesloe, Western Australia. Official records listed the family's surname as Aquilar Cunningham, although those closest to her would later say that they had always simply known themselves as the Cunninghams. Winifred grew up alongside her sisters Teresa and Juanita in Perth. As a young woman, Winifred trained as a shorthand typist and went on to work in a number of roles, including positions with the Arbitration Court and the State Housing Commission. In April 1953, Winifred married Edward Peace. Over the years that followed, they welcomed 2 children into their family. Their son Kevin was born in 1954, followed by their daughter Shirley in 1955. By the late 1950s, the family were living in Elm Street in Bentley. Like many young families, life revolved around work, raising children, and managing the day-to-day realities of family life. Those who knew Winifred described her as devoted to Kevin and Shirley. By 1959, life inside the Peace household had become increasingly strained. Money was tight. Winifred had attempted to borrow money by way of mortgage and had been looking for work, applying for positions as a kitchen maid, shorthand typist, and other roles as she tried to improve the family's circumstances. There were also allegations that Winifred had been gambling, contributing to mounting debts that the family struggled to manage. Whether those allegations told the whole story is impossible to know, but there is little doubt that financial pressures weighed heavily on the household. Around the same time, Edward had begun a relationship with another woman, Daphne Olive Giles, also known as Olive. By late 1958, it was common knowledge among those closest to the family that the relationship existed. Winifred was aware of it and, according to later accounts, was deeply distressed by the attention Edward directed elsewhere. Among Winifred's belongings, police later discovered an unfinished handwritten letter believed to have been written by her. In it, she referred to Olive and suggested she intended to leave Edward. According to Edward, she had once attempted to do just that, planning to return to her parents' home before missing the bus and returning to Elm Street instead. There is no way of knowing exactly what happened or what was said, but the letter offers a rare glimpse into Winifred's state of mind. There were also allegations that Edward had ill-treated Winifred during their marriage. A solicitor told police that Winifred had, on occasions, required medical attention, while members of her family spoke of incidents in which Edward had physically assaulted her. Those allegations were never tested in court and cannot now be independently verified, but they formed part of the picture police were presented with in the years after Winifred disappeared. People often ask why someone stayed in an unhappy relationship, but for many women in the 1950s, leaving wasn't straightforward at all. Financial independence was limited, social expectations were powerful, and separation carried a stigma that could affect not only a woman's reputation, but her ability to support herself and her children. Despite everything, Winifred reportedly told those around her that she would never give Edward up or agree to a divorce. By October 1959, the strain had been building for months when the Peace family received another blow. A letter arrived advising that they had fallen behind on their rent, and unless arrears were paid within 14 days, they would be required to leave the home that they had been renting in Elm Street. According to Edward, the letter sparked an argument that continued late into the night on the 21st of October and into the early hours of the following morning. He later told police that Winifred had said she would try find the money they owed and that afterwards he could go to blazes. Concerned that Winifred might leave and take the children with her, Edward stayed home from work the next day. At around 10 o'clock on the morning of Thursday, the 22nd of October 1959, Winifred visited her neighbour, Mrs. Williams. The two women discussed their entries in the Times Word competition, something Winifred regularly collected from Mrs. Williams before lodging them at Stone's drugstore. Mrs. Williams later told police that Winifred didn't appear unusually upset or distressed. They spoke as neighbours often do, and Winifred said that Edward had stayed home from work to negotiate with the landlord about the overdue rent. Before leaving, Winifred arranged to return later that afternoon to collect Mrs. Williams' Times Word entry. She never came back. Sometime before lunch, Edward visited the Beattys. Both Edward and Sylvia Beatty later recalled a conversation in which Edward indicated that he believed Winifred would be leaving home and that arrangements might need to be made for the children. By lunchtime, Edward had returned home. According to his account, Winifred, Edward, Kevin and Shirley all sat down and ate together. After lunch, Edward left the house again. He later said he visited a garage before going to the Boomerang Hotel. When he returned home at around 1:20 that afternoon, Winifred was gone. His accounts differed slightly over the years. In one version, he said both children were asleep in bed. In another, he said they were awake and alone in the house. What remained consistent was that Winifred was not there. In one interview, Edward recalled that Shirley told him her mother had gone to get pennies. It would be the last confirmed sighting of Winifred Peace. After discovering that Winifred wasn't home, Edward took Kevin and Shirley to the Beattys, where Sylvia Beatty cared for them for a period of time. Later that day, Edward collected Olive from work and returned home with the children. The following day, Olive gave notice at her job, explaining that she would need to care for the children. According to the records, Olive moved into the family home on Saturday the 24th of October, 1959. That same weekend, Edward, Olive, Kevin and Shirley attended the Caversham races, as had apparently been planned earlier in the week. Meanwhile, there was still no report made to police that Winifred was missing. It wasn't until the evening of Monday the 26th of October that Edward attended the Victoria Park police station. He told officers that his wife had left home following a domestic argument several days earlier. When police asked what inquiries he had made with family and friends in an effort to locate her, Edward admitted that he hadn't made any. Officers advised him to contact those closest to Winifred to see whether anyone knew where she might be. 3 days later, Edward returned to the station and reported that those inquiries had failed to locate her. A missing persons report was then completed. Once Winifred had been formally reported missing, police began making inquiries to try to establish where she had gone. The missing persons report was completed, recording details of her appearance. Winifred was described as having a wine-coloured birthmark extending along her right forearm, a slight cast in one eye, and naturally straight hair that she usually curled before going out. She was believed to have been wearing a grey skirt, a grey sweater, and black leather flat shoes when she was last seen. Female police officers made extensive inquiries on the family's behalf. They spoke with relatives and friends, contacted employment agencies and checked hospitals, lodging houses and restaurants. Railways, airways and social services were also approached in an effort to trace her movements. As days turned into weeks, newspapers began carrying reports of Winifred's disappearance. Members of the public came forward with information and possible sightings. Each lead was followed up, no matter how unlikely it may have seemed. One small detail remained unresolved. Mrs. Williams had told police that Winifred regularly collected her Times Word competition entry before lodging it at the Stones drugstore. Investigators attempted to establish whether Winifred had submitted her own entry on the day she disappeared. They were unable to confirm whether she ever did. Despite the scale of inquiries, no verified trace of Winifred was ever found. As news of Winifred's disappearance spread, reports of possible sightings began to emerge. Most would ultimately lead nowhere, but a handful would continue to raise questions decades later. One of the earliest came on Tuesday the 27th of October 1959, just days after Winifred disappeared. Two cashiers working at Charlie Carter's in Victoria Park reported seeing her. Both women knew Winifred personally. They said she appeared to be in a hurry and unusually wasn't accompanied by Kevin and Shirley. Although she didn't stop to speak to them, both women remained convinced that the person they saw was Winifred. Another sighting was reported in early December. Two sisters who also knew Winifred said they saw her standing at a bus stop on Canning Highway near the Hurlingham Hotel. They recalled two intoxicated men nearby, although they didn't believe Winifred was with them. The women later said they hadn't approached her because of the men's presence, but they remained certain about what they had seen. Other reported sightings followed. Some were investigated and ruled out. Others came from people who had never known Winifred and had recognised her only from newspaper photographs. On New Year's Day 1960, several people questioned a woman at the Wentworth Hotel because she bore a striking resemblance to the missing mother whose image had appeared in the media. The woman claimed she was from Sydney before leaving quickly. Whether the woman at the Wentworth Hotel was Winifred remains unknown. As the months passed, the reported sightings became harder to verify. Some people were certain they'd seen Winifred, others were mistaken, and somewhere within those conflicting accounts lay another unanswered question. Did Winifred survive long enough to be seen again? The questions surrounding Winifred's disappearance have never been easy to answer. Did she choose to leave? There were certain reasons to think that she may have wanted to. The pressures she was living under were significant. Financial hardship, an unhappy marriage, and emotional distress that had become part of her daily life. And yet no verified trace of Winifred was ever found. There were no confirmed contact with her parents or sisters, no established new identity, no evidence that she'd built another life elsewhere. Those closest to her struggled to reconcile the idea that she would simply walk away and never look back. Others have wondered whether Edward knew more than he ever admitted. His statements to people around him that Winifred would soon be gone, the delay in reporting her missing, and the speed with which life within the household appeared to move forward have all attracted attention over the years. At the same time, suspicion is not evidence. No charges were ever laid, and there was never sufficient evidence to directly implicate Edward in Winifred's disappearance. Then there is another possibility. If Winifred did leave home that afternoon, she would have found herself alone and vulnerable. She had little money, limited support, and few options immediately available to her. Whether she encountered someone willing to help or someone willing to take advantage of her circumstances is impossible to know. Perhaps that uncertainty is why this case has endured for so long. Each possibility asks us to believe something difficult. That a devoted mother vanished without ever contacting the people she loved, that someone carried knowledge of what happened and never spoke of it, or that the answer lies somewhere in between, beyond the reach of the evidence left behind. In 2020, Winifred's case returned to public attention as part of Western Australia's long-term missing persons project. Coroner Evelyn Vicker examined the available evidence surrounding her disappearance. The initiative was established to review older missing persons cases where it was strongly suspected that the missing person had died, but where no body had ever been found and no formal finding had ever been made. After considering the original police investigation, witness statements, and the years that had passed without any verified trace of Winifred, the coroner was satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that she had died. What remained unknown was how. The coroner concluded that something untoward had happened to Winifred, but there was insufficient evidence to determine the cause of her death or the manner in which it occurred. As a result, an open finding was recorded. More than 6 decades after Winifred walked out of sight, the questions surrounding what happened to her remained unanswered. Listening to Winifred's story through a modern lens, it's easy to ask different questions. Why didn't she leave? Why didn't she ask for help? Why didn't she tell someone what was happening behind closed doors? But those questions often overlook the realities many women faced at the time. Leaving wasn't always simple. Financial independence was limited, social expectations were strong, separation carried stigma, particularly for women with children. And while the language we use today might be different, many of the experiences themselves are not confined to the past. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 1 in 4 Australian women has experienced violence by an intimate partner since the age of 15. Statistics can tell us how common these experiences are. They can't tell us what happened to Winifred. What they do remind us is that cases like this don't exist in isolation. Behind every missing person's file is a family trying to make sense of an absence that never quite goes away. For her children, those questions remained long after childhood had ended. If you have any information relating to the disappearance of Winifred Peace, no matter how insignificant it may seem, you can contact Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000 or make a report online through Crime Stoppers Western Australia. If this episode had raised concerns about domestic violence or abuse in your own life, support is available. In Australia, you can contact 1800-RESPECT on 1800-737-732 for confidential information and support. Thank you for listening. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and never forget those who vanished from the West.